Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight's topic is the top 10 craziest rape policies. We've got a lovely show for you, and we've got a wonderful panelists here that just full of enthusiasm for this topic. We've got Allison Tiemann.
Yeah, definitely enthusiasm. That's wait. If it's enthusiasm, I guess there isn't any rape. So.
Well, it's enthusiastic consent.
Yeah.
Got your enthusiastic consent pom-poms. You consented to this show. There's no backing out, Allison.
There's no getting off this train. All right. Yeah. I'm Allison Tiemann. I guess I had the original idea for Honey Badger Radio, and I do a webcomic called Xenospora. Throwing it back to Rachel.
I do believe that was Xenospora.
Xenospora? Did I say it wrong?
Yeah. It's okay.
What?
It's okay. It's okay. You said it wrong. It's all right.
Okay.
You said your own comic wrong.
I guess my mispronunciation disease is getting worse.
Oh, do we have a Karen here? No, I think our Karen is.
Yes. No.
I'm here.
She's emerging.
I'm here, and I'm Karen Strawn. I own the channel Girl Writes What and the blog owningyourshit.blogspot.com. And I've just been doing this for 5 years or so now, and yeah, there you go. That's me.
We've also got the wonderful Brian Martinez. How you doing, Brian? You there?
Wonderful. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Brian Martinez. I'm an illustrator. I do a webcomic called Good Guy, and there's and I run I host the Nerdcast and the Gamergate show, and I'm just sort of popping in because this topic interests me as well. So
enthusiastically,
I am so enthusiastic.
This topic interests you, you dirty bastard.
I have my pom-poms. I'm ready to talk about this.
Who isn't interested in rape? Not just rape, but rapity rape.
Okay.
Rapity rape. Don't talk about it.
Okay. All right. Let's not. Get
Okay. We've also got the lovely Hannah Wallen.
Hi, I'm Hannah Wallen. I am the author of Breaking the Glasses at breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com. And if there are any feminists listening, we reject your consent and we're raping your ears right now.
I guess that's just how we level up here.
That's right.
See what I did there? See what I did there?
Yeah, I see, Rachel. And I didn't consent to that.
I'm raping you, Allison.
I know. I know.
Yes. I'm sorry.
I'm lying back and thinking.
You were interested in it.
That's okay. I am interested in finishing the intro, so.
And we also have Anna Cherry, who as always looks wonderful in hat.
It's true. I'm wearing my rape hat, and I am a adult entertainer. I'm basically a professional naked girl. I delve in the sphere of all sorts of things sexy and have quite a bit of a perspective on what women, cam girls, porn stars, etc., find arousing. And I guess I'm also a cosplayer. I write for some stuff for sluttygirlproblems.com, and I have a very porny Tumblr, anna-cherry.tumblr.com, where I write things and post porn gifs. Some of them are slightly rapey, but it's always consensual rape, and I'll be pimping that a bit, so prepare your ear holes for my penetration tonight.
And as always, I am your host, Rachel Edwards, and you can find my wonderful shitposting and thoughts at my blog, naughtynerdess.tumblr.com. I'll see you there. So, where to begin? Where do we start on this this rape train?
Yeah, the top 10 craziest policies on rape. I think we should start with number 10. That strikes me as a good place to start. I don't know. It's
oh geez. Well, let's see here. Let me see if I can view this.
Karen seems to be.
No, we're just going to take a page from David Letterman. We're going to go from the number 10 all the way down to number 1. Remember, number 2 is daffodil. So, just you guys
All right.
are Bender fans, so.
Daffodil, the rapiest
Oh
flower.
my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Okay, go for it, Rachel.
Oh gosh.
Number 10.
Why,
Just
why,
dive right in.
why daffodils? Well, I'm trying. I'm waiting for the
Daffodils!
No.
Futurama! Futurama! The top 10 list of words Bender, the most popular words Bender says, and the 5 is like bite, and 4 is my, and 3 is shiny, and 2 is daffodil.
Okay, gotcha. Let's move on to number 10.
Okay,
It's
last
like
year.
5 minutes into the show and it's already derailed by the word daffodil.
Yes. Well, I don't know if we can derail the rape train. I thought there was no brakes on it, but I guess that means it can also be derailed. Anyway, so number 10, the yes means yes standard for consent on college campuses. Last year, California adopted the yes means yes standard for consent on college campuses. This switched the standard from regular consent to affirmative consent, where partners have to constantly check in during intercourse, otherwise it could be viewed as sexual assault in the eyes of the campus. Consent must be enthusiastic or it somehow doesn't count. Wow. I can just see the fallout from this happening within the next year or so.
Well,
Can't
let's
you?
be clear. Let's be clear. Women don't need to get consent in this construct. It's just men. That's what
There
it
was
usually
one
falls out.
professor, or not professor, she was an administrator that actually said that. I can't remember her name, but there was an administrator that said it had to do with drunk sex and not the yes means yes law, but that it was the woman's consent that was being sought, that you didn't have to get consent from the guy.
Wonderful. And you know what I love about that particular bias is that the only intervention, or the only thing that seems to have consistently shown a reduced belief in the usual rape myths is challenging the rape myths around men's sexuality. Just keep going. So, in other words, by presenting the idea that women don't have to get men's consent, that women aren't sexually regressive, that men can be sexually reticent. Did I pronounce that right? Reticent? I don't know. But anyway.
Yes.
You actually, that challenging those rape myths around men as victims actually correlates more to reducing the rate of acceptance of rape than anything else. And so by encouraging these rape myths directed at male victims, that they're always willing, that men are aggressive, sexually aggressive, always willing, this particular feminist professor not only marginalizes male victims, but she encourages a cultural climate in which female victims are more likely to be victimized as well. Congratulations. Thank you, feminism.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to number 9 unless anybody wants to. Oh,
Wait. I was going to say something before I accidentally found myself outside of the thing. It's just
Okay,
real
we'll
quick. I think my favorite thing about this is that there's a meme that keeps popping up on Tumblr, and it's like 2 drunk girls like having like a lesbian makeout session, and it's like, well, who's the rapist here? If both of them are drunk, who is the rapist?
Well, it really goes back to the whole part that only women can be raped. It's victimizing women in such a massive way and ignoring the fact that men are human too. That not only are we ignoring the fact that men can be raped by other men, which is quite something that happens, but men can be raped by women. And the very idea that their tiny little brains cannot comprehend that a woman can be in such a position of power, and that men can be so socially and otherwise soft and not standing up for themselves, that concept, that their brains can't wrap themselves around that concept, is just telling to how deeply they believe that women are victims, and only victims.
Well, one other thing about the yes means yes laws, the affirmative consent laws, is that they essentially criminalize all sex. They absolutely criminalize sex as most human beings have it, and in addition to that, it really does kind of reverse the burden of proof. I mean, like, there was a reporter asked one of the sponsors of the bill in California, how would a man go about proving that he had obtained consent? And she said, well, your guess is as good as mine. Those were her exact words. Right? Your guess is as good as mine. In other words, there is really no way to prove it. You would have to film everything, and you can't film without somebody else's consent. You know, like it's that would be there. It's doubtful whether that would be admissible in court because and it would not be admissible in a university tribunal because university tribunals don't have any kind of standards of evidence, any kind of discovery, any deposition of the parties, nothing like that, right? They don't do any evidence gathering. There's no cross-examination, nothing, right? So, I mean, you sort of look at all of this, and essentially, any sex that a man has, he's a rapist on a California campus. He is a rapist until and unless the woman states otherwise after the fact. And, you know, and except for that, you know, if she doesn't say anything, then she could come back in 10 years and say he was a rapist and make him prove that he wasn't.
You know, well, it's criminalizing all sex in part because you can't prove consent. Even if you could prove consent, that wouldn't change anything. With this new enthusiastic consent law, and they've now got this arbitrary relative standard because enthusiastic is a relative term. One person might consider something enthusiastic when another person might not, and there's varying degrees of enthusiasm. All a person has to do is say, well, that was fake enthusiasm, or I really wasn't into it, and I wasn't yelling, so why did you think I was enthusiastic?
When I was saying, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, I was actually trying to say, oh God, stop, not oh God,
Yeah.
oh God, I'm coming.
I was upset. I wasn't happy. It completely takes away the ability to actually trust consent. It
Well,
makes women completely untrustworthy in
Yeah, it
California.
gets to the point where, I mean, the way that feminists, and it is feminists, let's face it, are conceptualizing consent when it comes to men and women, is they could argue that a woman pointing a gun at a man, stripping him naked, mounting him, and essentially having her way with him is him raping her because of a number of factors. Maybe she was ovulating that day and he happened to be good looking. That might be a cause of her. Yeah, because there is an actual feminist scholarship in which they argue that making a woman horny makes problematic consent, which is their way of inching it towards rape.
Well, it's basically they're trying to take the seduction laws that were on the books up until about the 1960s, right, where it was illegal for a man to seduce an unmarried woman. That those should now be considered rape. That getting a woman turned on is actually coercing her in some way.
Yeah.
And what really got me was Ezra Klein's article about this particular law, where he basically said that the law is wrong, it's unfair and has huge problems, but he still supports it because for one reason, essentially, it would put a cold stab of fear in the heart of any man looking to have sex with a woman on a college campus in California. It would make men afraid of women. And this is why he felt that the law was, a good thing, is because it makes men afraid of women. That is just absolutely the most repulsive sentiment. How do you even go back from there, from somebody actually saying something like that? Men should be afraid of women. Men should be afraid of sex. Men should be afraid of getting intimate with another human being, right? That they should have a cold stab of fear of jail, fear of ending their career, fear of getting booted out of college with $100,000 of student loans that can't be expunged in a bankruptcy, and no other college will take them, and now they don't have a degree and they're working at Starbucks, right, and paying off that debt, right? Like, how on earth is that a healthy fucking view of male-female relations? How is that even remotely something that is tolerable enough that it could be printed in a fucking article on a major publication? Like it's disgusting.
Yeah, it is
we
totally
have that
disgusting.
society.
But Anna, I
Yes.
just wanted to bring out a question from the
Oh, that's
chat. Jeff Wilson asks, Badgers, do you think we should make universities all male and all female? And I'd like to answer that, Jeff. I think we should make universities all feminist and all non-feminist. And I think that would create a much happier society. And I'll throw the question out to the rest of the panelists if you want to chime in on that one.
I really briefly wanted to talk about trust before we moved on from that, but just for a second, I kind of, being in the porn industry, it really strikes close to my heart about consent and trust and all of that, in the sense that we had Linda Lovelace, who performed enthusiastic sexual acts with men, animals, etc. And then about 5 years later, she was rescued by a Christian type man, and her book sales, etc., were going down. And she wrote another book, biography, about how she was forced to do all those acts that whole time. So, and that she didn't enjoy it, and it was terrible, horrible, put upon, just awful. So we have here someone who was filmed, someone who was enthusiastic, someone who consented, and yet that still was not good enough later to prove that she actually was consenting. So I think I don't really know how to go around that. The laws that they're putting in don't seem to be adequate, because even with all those things in place, the woman can still say that she didn't enjoy it, she didn't like it, she was raped, and we listen and believe.
Well, I think ultimately these people don't care about ending rape. They want every instance of sex to be a man to be a rapist at any point the woman decides. And this is the world that they want to create. But I wanted to ask, and this is to Karen's point, why does this Ezra want men to be afraid of women? What is he getting out of that?
The more men are afraid of women and who avoid intimate relations with women, the more he, as the owner of a magazine, has access to women. I think that has a lot to, like that. I think that impulse on the part of men to throw other men under the bus in order to get positive female attention, and I think that that's a very common impulse. It's almost sort of a universal impulse. I think a lot of men have to consciously resist that impulse once they become aware of it, but most men aren't aware that that's what they do. I think that that's probably what it is. Throw the other guys under the bus, more pussy for me. That's really the impulse. That's the instinct at work.
Okay, and then here's the other thing. I know recently a fraternity was warning its members, or posted a warning about bringing in sorority girls or into their parties. Correct? Does anybody remember this?
It was Bill Frezza who had written an article. He was sort of head of the national chapter of his fraternity or whatever. He was one of the big wigs there, and he wrote an article on Forbes that warned fraternities to not allow women in who had been pre-gaming, so women who had already been drinking in advance of a party. And it was in order to avoid what might happen to that poor girl in your house. It was to avoid, what are you going to be held responsible for if something happens to her, right? You are going to be liable, so you should protect yourselves by not letting these particular women in. And within a few hours, the feminist outrage was so extreme. Within a few hours, that article was pulled, and he was fired from Forbes.
So not only should men be afraid of women, they shouldn't allude to the fact that they're afraid of women. So they want men to be afraid of women, but men can't actually respond like they're afraid, or say they're afraid, or take any action or talk about being afraid. It's this. Okay, let's move on to the next item, because this is sort of derailed. So go ahead, Rachel. Take it away.
Oh gosh, let's see here. What's the next one? Oh geez, the Dear Colleague letter. The Dear Colleague letter was a document suggesting that colleges lower the standard of evidence we need to find someone guilty of sexual assault. As a result of the standards fell from the beyond a reasonable doubt standard to a preponderance of evidence standard, meaning that the likelihood that an assault took place must only be greater than 50% for the alleged assailant to be considered guilty. Discuss. Did I get that wrong? I think I...
No, that's correct. Something that's really insidious about this is a pretty much a way to substitute that standard for the existing courtroom standard, because anything that goes through that kangaroo court can then later be submitted and used in criminal court against the accused. So this actually becomes a way to sort of get in a preponderance of evidence standard in a criminal courtroom without actually having to go through the legal process to make that happen. Because any conclusions that were drawn, anything that was said, anything that was admitted, that wouldn't ordinarily be admissible in a court, becomes admissible because it was part of this hearing. And when you add that together with California's standard that we just talked about, this is particularly scary. This is pretty much can make these campuses, school to prison pipeline. It's the same school to prison pipeline that the zero tolerance policies created, where all it takes is somebody to point the finger at a guy, and make an accusation, and he's pretty much screwed.
Well, one thing that I did want to add is that colleges and universities, as far as I know, never did tend to use the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. They used the clear and convincing standard. And that's sort of an interim, it's like an intermediary standard. If you're in a civil court and what you're arguing over is money, right? Like, this guy owes me money, you will be using the preponderance of the evidence standard. But if you're like O.J. Simpson and you get taken to court in a wrongful death suit, you will only have to defend yourself to a clear and convincing standard, right, which is about 80% certainty. And that's what I think most colleges used. I don't think that they've ever used the beyond a reasonable doubt standard because they don't have the ability to parse evidence. They just don't have the wherewithal to decide a case on to that degree of certainty, right? So they've always, as far as I know, have used the clear and convincing standard. One thing that is a big danger, as far as what Hannah was saying, is that anything that is sort of in a legal hearing, if they had sued O.J. Simpson for wrongful death before they'd prosecuted him for murder, he might have been convicted of murder based on all of the stuff that occurred in the wrongful death lawsuit, right? It really is a way of sneaking stuff in the back door into a criminal court to have a civil or a quasi-legal proceeding that has happened, a hearing of some sort. So yeah, it's extremely troubling, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, we saw that Emma Solkowicz with her mattress, right? And the guy was cleared by the university tribunal with no legal representation, no deposition, no discovery, no ability to cross-examine, nothing. Right, on a preponderance of the evidence standard, right? And she still insists that that he raped her, and she didn't go to the police because she didn't want to go to the trouble of doing that. It would just be too draining, right? But carrying a 50-pound mattress everywhere you go, that's not draining. Like, the whole thing just stinks to high heaven, and even the idea that if a man has been absolved of responsibility based on those rules of process and that evidentiary standard, right, and the press is still willing to proclaim that he's a rapist, that's just absolutely bizarre to me.
Yeah, most likely if he had just growled in her direction, he would have been hit with the book on that one, with those kinds of standards of evidence. So at this point, it's odds that she actually raped him or something. But let's move on to the next item, which is very related to this item that we just.
Yes. Here we are.
Here we are. Yes. Let's
the
move
UK now. Oh god, this isn't funny at all. The UK now requires accused men to prove that women consented as their nationwide guideline for consent. That's how they go about prosecuting somebody. Basically, if you've been accused of rape in the UK now, because I think this was more of a recent reform. They said they wanted to bring rape policies into the new millennium, I guess. I don't remember what the reporting is. But yeah, they said that it was old and outdated. Like how? How is having a man prove that a woman consented? Just more modern. I don't.
As far as I know, I think that this is it's a standard. It's not a judicial standard that they're trying to introduce, although it's going to sneak its way. It's going to be subject to scope and find its way there. It's a Crown Prosecution Services standard as far as, and a police standard as far as, if the guy can't prove that she consented, then you follow the investigation as far as you can possibly take it, and you will prosecute, even if you think you're going to lose, if you can't prove that she consented. So it doesn't necessarily mean that more men are going to go to jail yet, because I don't think it's a judicial standard as yet. But it's a guideline for prosecutors to say, well, if he can't prove that she consented, then you need to move forward and you need to prosecute him. And all that's going to do under the judicial guidelines and the sort of the judicial process as it stands right now, all that's going to do is decrease the attrition rate. It's going to make it shrink from 6% to 4% or 2% of reported rapes ending up in the man being absolved of guilt in court, found not guilty, because you just can't. They're essentially forcing prosecutors to take cases to court that are not going to succeed.
Yeah, but won't those
the other thing
men then have to pay a bunch of money to get defended in court? Pay a lawyer.
Well, the other thing is that I don't know if this is the case in the UK, but in the US, most convictions, usually a man is convicted, a lot of them don't even see a trial. They're plea bargains.
Yeah.
So this may end up forcing more innocent men to plea bargain.
Yeah, that was how Brian Banks was convicted, was through a plea bargain. His lawyer basically said that you are a young, strapping, large, muscular black athlete, and you're going to lose. When the jury gets a look at you, you're going to lose.
It might be part of the point. Forcing prosecutors to bring cases they can't win. It might be part of the reason why this was advocated for. Because it's a pretty good strategy. I mean, it gives them something. If that happens, what you were talking about happens, and the rate of cases, the percentage of cases where there's a conviction goes down because there's the same number of convictions, but there's a whole lot more cases, then feminists will get to argue that we're doing a worse job now of prosecuting rape than we were before, and rape accusers obviously need more concessions in court, and there's a lot of men getting away with rape, and therefore they feel justified in attacking more due process rights. And it's the same thing that happened in the United States over the last 30 years or so, was that they used the we're not getting enough convictions, as if conviction is the goal and justice is not the goal, getting to the truth is not the goal, to attack due process rights for accused men.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought as you, Hannah. Now they can say the conviction rate is like 2%, and completely lie about the situation and scare more women. And of course, male victims are completely out in the cold entirely, but we don't care about them, right? Into not reporting their rapes. The other thing is, it reminds me of the feminist championing the change in the federal guidelines for rape. They didn't actually do anything to really include male victims of female rapists, but they did include a wider berth, and I was thinking the reason why they did that is now they can say there are even more unprosecuted rapes. There's an even bigger epidemic, and sorry, I don't mean more unprosecuted rapes, because they're not really advocating for rape victims as a whole, but more unprosecuted, politically viable forced sex encounters. The ones that they care about, which would be the ones that are politically useful to them. But I think we should probably move on to the next set of items. I can read these ones since these were my.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is where the show sort of takes, I believe, a turn to the incredibly macabre. Anyway, because not only and it is feminists that are doing this. Like this, there is some other aid organizations and other so-called advocates for rape victims who are engaging in this behavior, but for the most part it's being pushed by feminism and feminists. And this is where it gets really, really dark, because not only are feminists creating these incredibly draconian hoops that men have to jump through in order to prove consent, to prove that they're not rapists, feminists are also completely marginalizing male victims of rape. They are pushing forward policies that render them invisible in statistics, in aid organizations, international. Okay, well, anyway, we'll get to all of that. But it's amazing to me, the hypocrisy. On the one hand, they are trying to paint all men as rapists, and on the other hand, they're trying to completely remove from the conversation the fact that women rape. And this is the work of feminists with power. That, you may find a feminist who says, "Oh no, we support male rape victims." Well, no, you don't. You don't support them if it's the cost of your narrative that women are victims and men are perpetrators overall. And the feminists in power, definitely don't support male rape victims. They will crush them. They will destroy them in service of their narrative, because their narrative is all. Anyway, so number 7. So far, there has been no federal investigation to the epidemic of sexual abuse of juvenile boys in detention facilities by adult female captors. Approximately 10,000 boys are sexually abused every year in juvenile detention facilities, the majority of them by women. To put this in perspective, since the 1960s, 12,000, mostly boys, have come forward about the Catholic Church sex scandals. That's 12,000 over 50 years. Yet almost as many boys are abused by female guards in a single year just in the United States. And you never hear a word of it. There is apparently one institution that may be under investigation now. But yeah, I throw it out to the panelists. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'm not particularly worried about it, because Adele Mercier said that it was just a reflection of like the fact that most people in juvenile facilities are heterosexual and most people like sex. So, it's really not a problem. I don't understand why you're getting so upset about it, Allison. I just don't. I mean, come on. I'm a feminist. I'm just listening to feminist philosophy professor Adele Mercier, and she's telling me it's nothing to worry about.
Nothing to worry about. Yeah. Well, even if you are a feminist and only care about female victims, the fact that the biggest risk factor for a sexually abused teenage boy to go on to victimize other people, and not all of them do. I'm not talking about the vampire syndrome. Most don't. But the biggest risk factor is that they were victimized by an adult woman. So if you want to actually stop the rape of adult women, You start by stopping the rape of teenage boys.
Well, but I think it's clear that they don't want that, because every single effort that they have put into to conceal male victims, they have been very, very willing to concede that men can be victims of other men. Patriarchy hurts men too, right? Patriarchy hurts men too. And so they're okay with the idea of men being victimized by men and boys being victimized by men. Of course they are, as long it's not the gender of the victim so much as it is the gender of the perpetrator. That's what they want to conceal. That is because if half or 40% of all perpetrators of forced sex out there are women, then they have to concede that their entire worldview is completely wrong right from the foundation up. They would have to accept that they have got it wrong this whole time, right? And this is why they're fine with the idea of male on male violence. Oh, male on male violence, of course men are victims of male violence, blah blah blah, right? But violence between, in lesbian partnerships, sexual violence, especially in lesbian partnerships, which is, some studies have shown, is actually higher than in heterosexual and same-sex male partnerships. All of those things, they are hiding the female perpetrators, because in order to be a perpetrator, you have to be an agent, and in order to be an agent, you have to have power, right? And they don't want to admit that women have power, not just that they're okay with admitting that certain women, Margaret Thatcher had power, right? This person has power, this individual woman has power, but women as a group, women in general, having power over men, they cannot countenance that, because the moment they accept that, that's the end, that's when they're going to have to kick up their heels and freaking crack a cold one and say, okay, mission accomplished. The patriarchy is dead. Well, I'm sorry, the patriarchy, as they have envisioned it, has never existed, right? There have always been female perpetrators.
Can you imagine a world in which there wasn't an enormous outcry if the largest amount of sexual abuse in a juvenile detention facility was a male guard on girls? Can you imagine a world where there wouldn't be a huge outcry?
Oh, I know, and and men have their own fucking role in all of this bullshit too. I mean, look at Cenk, and every time there's some freaking 14-year-old boy seduced by his 35-year-old teacher, right? What is it? Oh, I wish my teacher had been like that when I was a kid. Oh, like that dude's lucky. Blah blah blah. This is just a typical male response. There is something about men that makes them highly resistant to even the idea that they could be a victim of a woman, right? And they will mock men who have been victimized by women. They will, oh, what are you, a pussy, right? Will you let her beat you up, or what? Like, haha, she took you for everything you had. Yeah, well, fuck,
Well, and here's the other thing. Just one more thing, because that somebody is responding to the fact that you said that women have power over. What the hell is this? I mean, women as a group can get a job at a juvenile detention facility and fuck as many teenage boys as they want, and nobody bats an eye, even at gunpoint, even by saying, "Hey, kid, if you don't you don't let me fuck you, you're going into solitary for 6 months." And nobody does anything. It's just, oh, well, that's okay. How is that not power? If women can do all of this stuff to men and men can do nothing in return, how is that not power?
Well,
how is it not power?
You look at, Susan B. Anthony in 1849, she was speaking at a temperance dinner, and she said that it's widely accepted that women are the arbiters of the moral and social norms of our society. Women are the ones who dictate what is considered to be tolerable in our society, right? Like 1849, and she's saying women are the ones with the power to dictate how everybody behaves.
Feminists know they have power. They're fully aware that they're powerful. They know that women have power. They know the power of weakness, and they know the power of being victims. They know the power of looking small and mousy and cute and afraid and saying, "Oh, help me. I don't know how to help myself." They know all of that. And they also know that a huge portion of that power would disappear if they admitted that they knew that. That is why feminists paint women as powerless. It's not because they think women are powerless. It's because they know that being perceived as powerless and being perceived as in need, and particularly in need of protection, is a great tool for manipulating people.
Well, it's only...
I wanted to respond back to something from earlier. There doesn't need to be an epidemic for there to be an outcry by feminists. There doesn't need to be an epidemic of any kind of victimization. If they don't have an epidemic and they need one, they'll invent it. That's what they did with the rape statistics they have. And they'll do it again. Invent an epidemic for their political purposes. But here they're faced with one. Here they're faced with a situation in which a minority of the guards, because women were less than half in the studies that showed this. Women were less than half of the guards, and they were 95% of the abusers. And they're perfectly willing to stay completely silent about that, not a word out of them. So it really all depends on their political purposes. Has absolutely nothing to do with the epidemic.
Well, as far as I just wanted to add to your point about weakness and weakness, the facade of weakness being great at manipulating people. Well, yeah, but the problem is it only works for women. It just does not work for men.
But yeah, that's true. But we should probably move on to the next item before we get too much into the. I know where this is going, and I need to stop it before it gets out of the station. Oh yeah, no. Okay, all right. So so here's number 6. Feminist groups or women's groups blocking a rape law to protect men and boy victims of female abusers in Israel and also in India. A women's group in Israel cancels a law that would protect men and boys against female rapists. In India, women's groups oppose changing a law against sexual abuse from using the word rape to sexual assault. They did so because the term sexual assault would have included the possibility of women as perpetrators of rape. They used the same argument that women's groups in Israel did. So both the women's group in India and the women's group in Israel used exactly the same argument why men and boys should not have protection against female rapists. And that argument was that men and boys would falsely accuse women of rape.
I know. So, now they're worried about false.
Now they're worried about it. Now they care.
Oh my goodness. Now they're worried about it. Because false accusations aren't a problem unless men can make them. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. No. And here's the thing, right? Because I mean it's a pathetic fear. It's an absolutely pathetic concern because go in as a man, go into a police station, and actually have bite marks on your frickin' penis, right? Be all bruised and bloodied up, and make an accusation against a woman, right? And see what happens.
Yeah. Well, if there's nobody who wants to speak to that, I mean, that's so egregious. It's such a frickin' double standard. It's just, it's mind-boggling.
Well, I will say one thing. Remember this the next time that feminists tell you that feminists are not against men's rights. They don't even believe in men's right to bodily autonomy. They feel that women's right to not worry that they might be falsely accused, which really... It's the same right that MRAs complain about men not having, but apparently that trumps a man's right to bodily autonomy. So he can't even have protection under the law. So it's obvious that feminists do attack men's rights. And they are against men's rights.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that it's just, well, you know what? This one is hard. There's really no discussion to be had. False accusations matter if men can make them, but not if women can make them.
Well, and India actually has a major false accusation culture. That actually, I hadn't even thought of that. I have a graphic that I created from articles written in the Hindu. It's published on the Hindu.com. Their articles, not my graphic. But I went through and did the math from what they found in a study that they did, and the culture in India, there is a 65 to 85% false rate among accusations in Delhi.
Yeah,
Delhi.
Well, one of the things too, right, is because I mean, like when we talk about false accusations, we're looking at about 50 to 54% of the accusations in Delhi are they actually originate from consensual sex between unmarried people.
40%. 40% were consensual sex reported by parents who did not want their kids to run off together, and another 25% were women responding to breach of promise to marry.
There you go. I mean, so
that's a total
a lot of them are actually, according to the statutes in India, and according to the legal tradition and case law in India, they could be considered to be rape, right? Even though they were entirely consensual. If he asked her to marry him, then they had sex, then his parents didn't give him permission to marry her, and she brings a rape charge, then the case is resolved when they get married, because what's he going to do? Go to jail or get married? Of course he's going to get married. He wanted to get married. His parents just wouldn't let him, right? And so you essentially have this situation where so many of these cases, something like half of these cases that come across, the average sexual assault investigator's desk, are resolved by the perpetrator and the victim getting married, right? And this, I mean, like, this puts a whole new spin, or maybe a proper spin, on the feminist, constant feminist lament of, historically women were forced to marry their rapists. I don't think they were. I think that because of the way the laws were for us 150, 200, 300, 400 years ago, right, and the expectations that unmarried people would not have sex. So there's no circumstance in which a woman would consent to sex with a man not her husband and ruin her reputation, all of this stuff, right, and ruin her prospects for a good marriage and all of these things, right, that when that would happen, what do? You bring a rape charge and force the guy to marry her, right? You have a shotgun wedding, and boom, they're married, right? So, I mean, it really is...
Well, it's something that they've just taken female victimhood out of it and contextless asserted it.
Yes.
And but let's move on to the next one, because we still got 5 to go, so let's keep this train chugging right along. All right. Non-government organizations, essentially aid organizations, making it informal policy to discriminate against male victims of sexual violence. Apparently, aid agencies that help survivors of sexual assault in war-torn and poverty-stricken regions openly discriminate against male victims. They restrict the definition of rape to female victims, leading to complete invisibility of male victims in statistics. They even turn horribly abused male victims away at the door, and restrict funding programs if the majority of services are not granted to women. You'll find that this is actually a consistent theme among so-called aid agencies. If it's a choice between recognizing the reality of victimization and their funding stream, guess which wins out? And they just ignore male victims. And in this case, we're talking about male victims who have to get their anuses reconstructed after having been repeatedly raped with objects. Now, these are even the guys in chat who are saying, "Oh, I would have loved to have had sex with my female teacher and then end my life in a crack house when I was 25 because I have a depression that I never understood the source of." Even those guys, I'm sure you don't agree that this is appropriate. That men who have been raped to the point where they have to wear maxi pads to contain the continual anal leakage and blood, and their bodies aren't healing and can't heal. Maybe that's sort of a bad thing, and them not being recognized and not getting any aid, therapeutic or medical, is rather a travesty of epic proportions. If I can, anyway, someone else take it away, because I'm freaking. Anyone? I'm just shocked you into silence.
Yeah, it's oh god, it's terrible.
Yeah, this is really bad one. This is really bad.
Hearing a lot of these things coming out of third world countries, or countries that we usually associate with poverty, you start to understand that there is not a lot of aid for these people to begin with. I was actually surprised to find that there was at least an advocacy group for men out in certain parts of South Africa. I mean, I know that South Africa is a little more modernized in areas and things like that, and that's and it's been well developed. But it's actually a group, and they said that it was a real problem, but they're seeing more instances where men are reporting these kinds of assaults in Africa and other places.
Well, they're also reporting being raped by women as well. And
yeah, that's what I mean. It's.
I mean, there's also a form of rape that they force a man to insert his penis in they cut open part of a tree that has extremely acidic sap, and then force him to insert his penis into it. And of course, sap is very sticky, so it essentially sticks to his penis and burns the skin off. Lovely stuff like that, but we don't care.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we don't, it's like, whatever.
It's just a bunch of terrible stuff, but people only see the women. And to be honest, I'm going to say this right now, and this tends to be the thing that we keep seeing again and again. And I know we discussed this previously, especially when I think we were discussing things like Boko Haram and stuff like that. The thing that gets funding for a lot of third world countries, a lot of these organizations, is by focusing on children and women. Okay? Children, female victims and children. And when you amp up that these people need help, people rush in, they'll pour money and resources into it. The moment it's just men, nobody cares.
People even withdraw resources. So
and
it's just like, they might as well fall off a cliff. These male victims,
though.
These male victims, they might as well fall off a cliff. And I don't understand how
they'll outright blame them. Well, these guys were part of a war, and therefore, this is just part of their war, even though not all of the men that this is happening to are soldiers, and many of them are not.
Most of them aren't. And in fact, one of the interesting things about this is there is a high rate of male sexual abuse during warfare. And one of the problems with really getting an accurate count is a lot of the male survivor stories go like this. A platoon of men took turns raping me, sometimes with objects, until my entire backside was completely torn up, and then one of them took me into a ditch and slit my throat with a machete. But I wasn't dead. They left me for dead, but I wasn't dead. These are men survivor stories, because the difference between female victims and male victims is that the men are killed after, and thus they aren't in the statistics. Anyway, I think I've completely... Go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to speak to something that Rachel said earlier about Boko Haram. It made me think about something else when it comes to ignoring male suffering, in particular in third world countries. And I was just reminded of a video, I think it was in Egypt, that supposedly was about a vicious beating that a woman had received.
The woman in the blue bra.
Yeah, and with the blue bra, and the focus was on her, but meanwhile there was a guy who actually went back to help her when she kind of got overrun, and then that guy got dragged and the shit kicked out of him, like off to the side and no one ever spoke about it.
Oh,
I mean,
you know, one of the most interesting things about that whole thing was yes, there was this man who was getting an even more vicious beating, just maybe 10, 15 feet away. But also that, I mean, she was beaten by the police. Then her garment fell open, right? And of course, here's the thing, right? Is that as a police officer dealing with a crowd like that, I wouldn't necessarily trust that it's a woman under a burqa.
right. So it's like when they realized she was a woman, they kind
So
of.
when her garment fell open, right, that was when it stopped, right? And one of the cops, he was sort of mid-stomp. He was lifting his leg to stomp on her, and one of the other cops pushed him away to stop him from doing that once they realized, oh, there is actually a woman under here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they covered her back up right away and dragged her off, you know, away from the violence and away from the crowd. Right? So
Yeah.
she was literally treated, as far as protesters get treated in Egypt, she was treated like gold. She was treated like a queen.
Yeah, and I also heard, I could be wrong, but I also heard that, you know, how they always show these acid attacks that, you know, have been done to women. There are actually male victims of these things too.
30%. 30% of acid attack victims worldwide are men and boys.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things that we don't hear.
And some of the perpetrators are women. And in fact, actually, vitriol, which is what acid, what used to be called acid attacks. Throwing acid used to be called a vitriol attack, right? And it used to be considered a woman's weapon, and it was commonly used in the late 1800s and early 1900s by women whose fiancés broke off their engagements, or whose husbands cheated, or whatever. There was one blues musician, Blind Willie McTell, whose mother poured acid in his eyes when he was a boy. There's acid was considered like poison to be a woman's weapon.
And in a lot of cases, women are the ones using it. But Rachel, go ahead. Let's get doing Hannah, and then we need to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I cannot stress enough, and the thing I wanted to make very clear, is the media's role in all of this. Because it's not just the people who fund all of these programs. The media also, plays a role in this. And this is something we, like I said, we went over when we were discussing that larger problem of Boko Haram. The thing about it is that they gravitate towards women in peril and children. And everybody knows that it's a very primal thing.
Well,
so the thing about it is that when you do that, people have this feeling that there's suddenly an epidemic of rape, or there's an epidemic of violence against women, but where they only see this happening to women instead of seeing the larger picture, where often there's a lot of violence happening to everybody, and life is really shit in a lot of these places for everyone.
I just wanted to say the problem is not with the media. The problem is with us, because the media tells us what we want to hear. They show us what we want to see, and they only isolate female victims and show us that side of the story in isolation, because that's the side of the story that appeals to us, that we want to hear about as a society. So it's not a problem with the media, it's not a problem with the government, it's not even a problem with NGOs. It's a problem, like Aaron Pizzi said, where there she was, she had a house for male victims. The town council had given her, right? She had everything set up, and she went looking for donations, and she went to all of the people who had donated to her women's shelter, and they all 100% said, no, we're not donating to a men's shelter.
Exactly. People will not donate to men. They will not feel compassion for men, and sometimes it's pretty hopeless. But let Hannah speak to this topic, and then we're going to move on to the next wonderful sunshine and roses topic. So go ahead. Hannah, are you struggling with the mute button? Okay,
I
well,
thought you said Hannah, not.
no, Hannah.
Oh, okay.
Hannah has her name, but she doesn't seem to be responding, so let's move on to the next.
Can I just say something real quick?
Is it going to be really quick?
Very, very quick.
All right.
Very ultimately, as you said, there's no compassion towards men. We do not hear men's cries. We do not want to give them anything. The whole process can be seen from a culturally anthropological perspective when a group of humans or any kind of primate animal, anything, reaches maximum capacity. There is a need to stop breeding, and oftentimes animals turn to creating their society to be more homosexual, basically. There is a feminization of men, and this whole society becomes women-dominated and very feminist, if you were to say it that way. And that is all entirely a way for population control. That's why we don't have compassion for men. We don't care about men because we know we have too many humans, and one man can basically impregnate the whole world. So we are in a process of using our instinctual animal processes to curb population growth.
Well, the other thing is that we also put forth a lot of social programming to treat men as expendable. But let's move on to the next item. Unfortunately, Hannah has dropped, so we're going to have to skip her and move on. Okay, so ignoring the high rate of civilian female sexual abuse, civilian and female sexual service woman sexual abuse of male servicemen. As a listener, you've probably heard a lot about the high rate of sexual abuse in the Army. Once again, it's mostly portrayed as male servicemen assaulting a female or sometimes a male. Did you know that at least half of servicemen victimized sexually in the military are victimized either by a female serviceman or servicewoman or a female civilian? That's what the statistics actually show. At least half of guys in the military are being victimized by women.
Well, that does surprise me. I am surprised it's not higher. I mean, I suppose
it probably is higher because the military has a huge culture of. It's even worse. I mean, if it's bad for men in the general population, revealing the fact that they've been victimized by a woman, in particular, then it's going to be like 10 times worse for military men to reveal something like that.
Well, I think maybe there might be, you know, a lower percentage of female perpetrators among that population, just because it's sort of like on a submarine, right, where it's all men. There's just going to be no female rapists there. You know, that it is a very, very masculine environment, and it is mostly men. It's still 83% men or something like that. So I mean, there just are more men there, and so I would think that maybe it would be. But I'm actually surprised because the numbers as far as young men, college-age men who've been subjected to unwanted sex that's been forced or coerced. Sexual activities and even rape, right? 95% of the perpetrators were girls or women that they knew. So,
you're surprised it's not higher? Well, I think part of it is. I think did you mention this? It's a very male dominant environment.
Yes.
So the idea that in an environment that is 80% male, the rate of rape of men by women reduces by, I guess, actually to half. So men are only half of sexually abused men are being abused by women in an environment that's almost all male.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like the number of rape victims is probably going to be proportional to the number of rapists, and just got a lot of female rapists. They do double time.
I don't think so. I don't think the number of rape victims is going to be proportional to the number.
Okay, well, I retract that because I don't want to get derailed, but let's, does anybody, okay, it looks like we got to move on. All right, here's the doozy. Mary Koss, feminist Mary Koss, influencing the Center of Disease Control to redefine a female rapist physically forcing a man to have sex as made to penetrate. Feminist Mary Koss doesn't think a man pointing at doesn't think a woman putting a gun at a man, stripping him, and forcing envelopment on him to be rape. In other words, forcing his penis into her vagina to be rape. Feminist Mary Koss was a consultant to the Center of Disease Control. As a consultant to the Center of Disease Control, she likely influenced them to change their policies regarding what they consider rape in government statistics, in the government statistics they gather on rape. In an interview with the Center of Disease Control, Hannah Wallen requested their rationale for using the made-to-penetrate definition for victims of female aggressors. Apparently, in the interview with Hannah Wallen, the representative for the Center of Disease Control lied about what definition the Center of Disease Control uses for rape. As you can see when you go to their website, the CDC defines rape thusly. Quote, a completed sex act, i.e. rape, is defined as contact between the penis and vulva or the penis and anus involving penetration, however slight, contact between the mouth and penis, vulva and anus, or penetration of the anal or genital opening of another person by a hand, finger, or other object. In other words, this definition includes a woman making contact between her vulva or vagina and a male victim's penis. So on their website, they actually use a gender-inclusive definition of rape. Yet in its intimate partner and sexual violence surveys, the CDC splits rape into two categories. Rape, when it's a male aggressor penetrating a victim, and made to penetrate when it's a female aggressor enveloping a victim. As a strange coincidence, this is consistent with Mary Koss's theorizing about the experiences of men having been physically forced into having sex by a female aggressor. Then, rather than being raped, it just wasn't rape because reasons. Incidentally, if you use the CDC's own definition of rape rather than the categories they invented just for their survey, just for their government statistics, the CDC is finding that men consistently report rape, that the same or more rape victimization as women in the last year. So in 2010, men reported the same amount of rape victimization. In 2000, I believe 12 or 11, men reported the same rate of rape victimization, or greater rate of rape victimization as women. And you know, as a final thought, I wonder why they're trying to hide that. Anyway,
they're trying to hide it because it's predominantly female perpetrators, right? Like, you know, like you look at the Catholic priests and the altar boys, right? And under any reasonable definition of rape that includes the things that the CDC includes, which is, you know, oral penetration, so a man forcibly putting his penis in your mouth, right? Or a digital penetration, you know, a man forcibly, or a person forcibly putting their fingers inside your vagina or anus, right? You know, one of those Catholic priests putting his mouth around a 7-year-old boy's penis, right? That would not be considered rape to the CDC, right? Even though it's a male perpetrator, and the reason that they're going to hide those male perpetrators, right, those 20% or so of the lifetime perpetrators of made to penetrate, the reason they're going to hide them is because it also hides all the female perpetrators of forced sex, right? Every single one of them. There is not a single female victim. There, like, you look in the chart, in the tables, and made to penetrate for female victims, there's a little asterisk there because there weren't enough to make note of it, right?
I don't think there were any, really.
Yeah, and so it's essentially, you know, and when you almost all of the rapists, 98% or something like that, of the men, or of the people who penetrated women, right, were men, right? So they're calling rape. They're essentially calling it rape when it's something men do to women, and they're calling it not rape when it's something women do to men. And it's not to hide the male victims because they're perfectly happy to say that X number of men were raped by men, right? Because, hey, we have no problem saying men are rapists, right? They don't want to admit that women are actually capable of this stuff, right? Of this kind of behavior. And the really, really horrible thing is from everything I've read, right? And one of the points that you made before was that, you know, the perpetrators and the victims would be sort of equal in number. No, I don't think so. At least I don't think so when it comes to male rapists and female victims. That tends to be a pathological behavior. Almost always, it tends to be a repeated behavior. And so, you have convicted rapists who were convicted of one rape, and when they're given condition of anonymity and confidentiality, they will admit to, an average of 11 rapes before they got caught for one, right? Okay, so this is what the male rapist looks like. It's a pathology. It's not a normal behavior, right? When it comes to women, some of the numbers that I've looked at of not just women, and like the feminists saying 1 in 3 college-aged men, would rape if they could get away with it. According to this completely bogus study, go onto Mr. 1001 Nights channel and look at how he broke that down and how bogus that study is. But 1/3 of men say they would do it if there would be no consequences and no one would ever find out, right? Some of the numbers that I've looked at have suggested that up to 40% of women have reported not being willing to do this, but having done this. Having done it to get sex out of an unwilling man. Having used force, having used verbal coercion, having used blackmail, having used a weapon, having used, all of this stuff, right? Having gotten him drunk or high so that she could take advantage of him. Up to 40%, right? So,
the force and verbal coercion thing, that is, there's a whole culture built around teaching young women and girls how to manipulate that way, how to verbally coerce, how to shame, how to push, how to nag, and persuade their boyfriends, their husbands, their fathers, their sons, brothers, male co-workers, buddies, whoever they're dealing with that's male, to do whatever they want. So it's not really all that surprising that it would bleed over into sex. But I wanted to point something out about that study, and particularly about the phone call, because it's kind of relevant it's kind of relevant to the whole thing. But that phone call actually occurred because I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. And it has to do with their effort to hide female perpetrators. They didn't want to give me the information, but there is nothing in the law that would allow them to withhold the information from me. It wasn't information that violated any of the standards that were included in the Freedom of Information Act that would have been standards for refusing to release the information. And those standards are real cut and dried. They're things like if it's a national security issue, if it's somebody's proprietary information, things like that. It's not just, that this is of a sensitive nature, that they don't want it criticized, or that they think it's going to be triggering. No, it has to actually be a violation of somebody else's rights in order for you to have that information, or it has to endanger the country in order for you to have that information before they're allowed to withhold it. And that said, they did to an extent. They gave me part of the data, but not all of the data. They told me that it was not the 2010 data, but I've looked at it repeatedly since then, and it is. It is the 2010 data. It's just not all of it. But it's pretty clear from the behavior there that they are trying to prevent that information from being looked at and prevent it from being analyzed. And not only did they refuse to hand over the complete data, they then made the extra step of hiding it in a university library. And when I say hiding it, I mean you can't access it unless they decide you're qualified to look at it. You have to actually meet certain specifications, not just academic specifications, but you have to give an approved reason for wanting to see it. In other words, you can't know that information unless they're certain you're going to view it through the same feminist academia filter as the researchers themselves.
I actually one thing that I really pissed me off was how they gave the lifetime numbers for the acts perpetrators by gender, right? Because the 80% lifetime number for made to penetrate, the 80%, 79.2% of the perpetrators being only women, right? That one would expect that over the course of 10 or 15 or 20 years for a man, that the recollection of being victimized by a woman in that way may be subsumed underneath the cultural narrative that men rape and women are raped, and that men recontextualize these things, and there's all kinds of evidence that they do. And so I'm really pissed off because I know they collected these numbers, right, as far as in the previous year, right? I know they collected previous year numbers for the gender of the perpetrator, right, and relationship to the victim and all of these
They're
things.
just not releasing it.
They don't want to release it, and I know why they don't want to release it, because it's probably 100%
Of men being raped by women. It's
Yeah.
not 80%, it's 100%. So we're looking at women being 50% of all rapists in the community. Plus. 50% plus. And they don't want to release that information.
Well, my assumption is if we were wrong, they would release the information to
Oh
prove it.
yeah. Oh
I mean,
yeah.
if that is one piece of evidence right there, that the fact that they are not releasing the information but actually hiding the information shows that they have something to hide.
Yeah.
Because if they wanted to correct something, all they'd have to do is show the numbers.
Yeah. And we get a lot of people saying in blog posts, oh, well, the 40%, women being 40% of rapists is based on erroneous men's rights statistics. Well, we have, and then they also saying that the CDC responded and said that it's erroneous. Well, all the CDC has to do to prove that it's erroneous is release the number of female rapists in the last year. That's it. And they refuse to release that information. So if they're actually going out and saying, oh no, 40% is wrong, but we don't want to tell you the actual number, what does that say? We don't want to actually give you the hard facts of the matter. We don't want to release those hard facts, but we still want to say that, oh no, those conjectures are wrong.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, and I remember Futrell's freaking unbelievably retarded breakdown that really it didn't even employ Mary Koss's justifications, which I could actually acknowledge, are justifications that are in line with, the cultural narrative. They're in line with traditional norms. They make sense in that way, right? Her justifications that oh well, when men are forced into sex by women, they're not really forced. They're just ambivalent about their sexual desires, and they really wanted it. They just didn't realize it at the time, and they have a perception that they were forced, but they weren't really forced, right? Okay, that agrees with all of these sort of gendered narratives that we have, right? As far as how men and women work and operate, right? So it makes sense. I mean, it's completely bogus and stupid and cunty and fucking bigoted, but it still makes sense, right? It's consistent.
It's consistent with something.
Yeah. Okay, but Futrell's his deconstruction of men's rights arguments that it was basically it was just that, oh well, it's different, and well, and then he tried to do some convoluted math, and like it was really pathetic. Like I don't even understand how. Well, I understand how people read him, because the people who read him are like Anti-Alias and Mancheese, aka Sal Polani, and Deb Magil, and all of these feminists who troll my channel and are completely batshit insane. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, his so-called rebuttal is almost irrelevant to the issue, because the honest to God fact is that if the CDC really wanted to rebut the statistic that 40%, likely 40% of all rapists in 2010 were female, if they wanted to rebut it, all they would have to do is release those statistics. And they don't. In fact, they are doing the exact opposite. All they have to do is release the information, and they're doing the exact opposite. They're hiding it under layer after layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy.
Yeah,
Because they don't want to show it.
They don't even have to release it. They just have to make it accessible.
Yeah, they don't have to
They've
release
done
it.
the
just make it-
opposite.
Yeah, and they've done the opposite. So it's obvious that they have something to hide. And they don't want to show it. And the other thing is that, Karen, they found their next survey has come out, and once again, men are reporting actually more made to penetrate, so more physically forced sex with a female, likely a female aggressor, than women are physically reporting that with a male aggressor. So we now have 2 years in a row where the last year men report the same, approximately the same or more rape than women, rape victimization than women. 2 years in a row. 50 years from now, we will have 50 years of men reporting exactly the same level of rape in the last year as women or more. 50 years from now, we have 50 freaking surveys in 50 years, and they will have reported exactly the same level of rape as women in the last year. And yet, the lifetime numbers will still be 1/4.
Well, yeah, because the you were the one who cited that one study by Whittam and Morris, I believe it was.
Yeah, well, they found that male victims didn't report it as rape. They still contextualize it, so they would have still been captured on this survey. But researchers into memory know that memory conforms to dominant narratives.
Yes.
People remember things. Memories stay salient relative to how well they fit the dominant cultural narrative.
Well, when every guy plus Cenk Uygur is saying, "High five, dude! You 14 years old and you got laid by your hot 30-year-old teacher." Oh man, you the man. I wish I was that lucky when I was 14, right? You're going to recontextualize that as consensual on a conscious level, right? In order to cope, right? And here's the real problem with that, is because all of the negative sequelae, right? Men don't necessarily feel immediate trauma from these situations. I'm sure that many of them do, but many of them don't feel the sense of immediate trauma that women tend to feel. But there is still the absence, the hijacking of your autonomy, the hijacking of your sexuality, the complete negation of your choice, your freedom of choice, all of those things. Being coerced into something you don't want to do. I think that in many ways that impacts men even more deeply than it impacts women, because men are supposed to be invulnerable to that. Men are supposed to never, ever, ever, ever be in a situation where they're being forced into doing something they don't want to do. Right? That's sort of how we look at men. Oh, men are independent, men are autonomous, men have agency, right? And so it completely undermines their identity as men, I think, and so the negative sequelae, the things like drinking and doing drugs and self-harm and suicidal thoughts and acting out and behavioral problems and all kinds of, becoming depressed, and they may not associate all of that with the event, right? They may not say, "Oh, I'm doing all of these things because of this thing that happened to me." They may not even connect them consciously, right? Because they've subverted their conscious acknowledgement of what happened, right? underneath this cultural narrative of masculinity and what it means to be a man and what the culture expects of you and all of this stuff, right? But all of those negative sequelae, are essentially identical between men and women. The only difference is that women are more likely to say, yeah, I'm a drunk because I got raped, right? And men are more likely to say, I'm a drunk because, I don't know.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Well, one of the things I wanted to point out, because we keep talking about this as if it's all a memory thing. Being physically dominated by a woman is a taboo in our society. It's not necessarily a taboo on the level of cannibalism, but I'd say it's almost as much of a taboo as hitting a girl is. It's just as bad to be physically or mentally dominated by a woman, as far as the way you get treated if you admit it and you're male. It's just as bad, and it has been. It has been for quite some time. If you go back in history, there were what do they call it? A skimmington, when the entire village would show up and ridicule a man if he was henpecked. So imagine how society responded to men who admitted to being raped by a woman. This isn't something that a guy would necessarily have to misremember to not want to be able, not be able even to admit it to a stranger on the phone, even without the word being used. And no matter how many tests that you give to people regarding their willingness to lie in order to please the surveyor and things like that, you're not going to catch all of that. They're not going to they're not going to respond the same to simple questions about simple everyday things as they are to something that is that level of taboo. And if you're listening and you don't get it, think of it this way. If a surveyor called your house and started asking you questions about preparing family recipes with human flesh in them, would you be able to answer those questions very easily? Or would you clam up and not want to talk about it? And if your family did that and you knew it was wrong, you'd have a really, really rough time discussing it with a stranger over the telephone. The idea is horrifying. So anything like that, you're going to have that kind of problem. You can't trust that people didn't give yes answers, particularly men didn't give yes answers on a survey like this, because they didn't have the experience. And you can't trust the lifetime numbers, because as a guy gets older, he becomes more and more pressured to conform to society's standards and more pressured to suck it up and drive on. And so 30 years after it happened, no, he's not going to admit it. Mm-hmm. And when they're asking baby boomers, they're asking a different generation too.
Yeah. Well, what's really fascinating now is that on the National Crime Victimization Survey, which is like if a man responding yes to a question about forced sex on the Center of Disease Control's Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey is hard, is unlikely because of the social narrative. Having a man respond yes on the National Crime Victimization Survey is even more incredible. It's an even greater act of bravery, because that survey is not just taken over the phone, it's taken face to face. So these guys, and what they found for 2012 is that 40% of men revealed, not 40, sorry, 40% of rape victims, around 40% of rape victims were male. So these guys, and this is incredible because it jumped almost, I think, 4 times in 1 year. I don't know what's going on, but these men were actually staring a person in the eye and saying, yes, I was raped. Or yes, I was forced to have sex in the context of a criminal victimization survey. So these guys are actually defying the social narrative. Like we're starting to see men who are actually saying, no, I don't fucking give a shit. I'm not going to abide by the social narrative. This happened to me, and if you don't accept that this happened to me, that you can go fuck yourself. And so we're seeing this incredible bravery, this incredible courage by men to actually reveal this hidden secret and say, you know, fuck social norms, fuck the narrative. This happened to me, and I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to shuffle, I'm not going to put my eyes down and shuffle off into the corner and be silent and be submissive and be weak and small. I'm actually going to own what happened to me. And I'm going to speak my truth, even if it is to power. And to me, that's incredible. It's like in 1 year, the amount of men is starting to come on a national crime victimization survey, which requires an incredible, like again, it requires an incredible amount of bravery to look someone in the eye and say something that taboo. On that, we're starting to see more male victims stand strong and stand tall. And that is, to me, that's amazing. And I think we're going to start seeing that. I don't know what's changed, but so we're starting to see the national crime victimization surveys come in line with the less painful surveys, the less painful, like the surveys that are less painful to take, the surveys that are less difficult to take, like the intimate partner and sexual violence survey, where you're just talking to a person on the phone. You're not staring someone at the eye and writing this down. And we're starting to see the national crime victimization survey come into alignment with those other surveys. And for me, I mean, this doesn't represent an increase in male sexual victimization. It represents an increase in the courage of male survivors to come forward and own their truth and speak it, even in the face of a society that would deny that they exist. And yeah, and that's to me, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. Again, I don't think this represents a increase in male sexual victimization, but it does represent an increase in men being willing to talk about it, and not bow their head and shuffle off into the corner and be submissive to the dominant narrative. Anyway, let's move on to the next item. I don't see anybody else wants to talk. I guess I sucked the air out of the room with that.
Yeah, it's just pretty heavy, Allison.
Yeah, I know. I'm throwing some heavy stuff. I've been working on this specific issue for like looking into these statistics and doing the kind of whatever advocacy I can do on this issue for like 12 years. So to see men start to stand up and stay, you know, this far and no further is actually, it's really heartening for me. It's amazing. Okay, so item number 2, Just Detention International, which for those of you who don't know is supposedly an aid organization that's trying to end prison rape, using elaborate mental gymnastics to turn prison rape from something that primarily victimizes men into something that really victimizes women. So-called prison rape reform activist Louisiva Stanow of Just Detention International describes male prison rape as being about misogyny because men will sexually dominate each other when they don't have women to sexually dominate. Excuse me. This despite the fact that male prisoners are actually more likely to be sexually abused and exploited by female guards than other male inmates. And also for the misogyny double play award, Miss Stanow, she also is rendering invisible the fact that female inmates are more likely to be sexually abused by other female inmates. Oh, you guys want to discuss that one?
That's a mess.
Yeah, that is. I actually have an even longer piece that I can read exactly what she said. Okay. Quote, "In my mind, the work to stop rape in prisons is directly related to the broader the broader prison rights movement, but also to the broader movement to end sexual violence generally. There's a very clear link that we see every day in our work: rape in prison, misogyny, and homophobia. Most of the people we work with are men, given the fact that 93% of prisoners are men. Sexual abuse rates are more or less comparable with what happens outside the facilities. Wrong. What we see so clearly is that the prison environment tends to be a hyper-masculine environment where anyone who is perceived to be being feminine or weak is somehow not living up to the hyper-masculine ideals and becomes vulnerable to abuse. We see that the sexual abuse that occurs between inmates in a male prison is a mirror image of the sexual abuse that occurs in the community, perpetrated by men with women as survivors. We see that once you have been raped in prisons, you have been technically considered a woman. This is not just true in the United States, it's what we see represented in our work in South Africa as well. Oh God, these people are everywhere. The perpetrator's masculinity becomes strengthened and the survivor becomes feminized. We see very similar dynamics, and that means that our work is the same battle against sexual abuse and oppression that groups are fighting on the other side as well. Remember, most sexual abuse in prison of male inmates is by female guards, not by other male inmates. And the other biggest group, percentage-wise, is female inmates being abused by other female inmates. Nowhere in this conception is it explained by toxic masculinity.
You know, like there is one thing that I will grant them is that from the testimony that I've seen from male rape victims in the Congo and Darfur and other places like that who were raped by men. They do feel emasculated, and often they won't say that they were raped. They will say, I was used, he used me as he would a woman. You know, and like that is, here's the thing that gets me, right? Because I was answering a question today to somebody who's like, well, you know, why are women so concerned about body hair, you know, and underarm hair and the whole bit, right? And why do they feel pressured to blah blah blah? And I'm like, well, because there's a binary, right? And body hair is considered masculine, and if you're a woman, you don't want to be considered masculine. You want to be considered feminine. So the less body hair you have, the more feminine you become. Right, so or it's perceived to be, right? And so, but like we don't necessarily see that that women removing their body hair is valuing their femininity, right? We actually see that as a victimization of those women. They're living up to standards, blah blah blah, the whole bit, right? Like there is something to be said for a straight man to feel emasculated when he gets raped by another man. I mean,
yeah, because it's essentially being something that's not. I mean, it's like you want to feel feminine when you're a woman, you want to feel masculine like you're a man. But the problem also with Louisa Stanow's assessment is that she's completely wrong about prison culture.
Mm-hmm.
There are first of all, in prison culture, if there's a consistent sort of tie between rapists in prisons, rapists of men in prison, and rapists of women outside of prison, then why in prison culture are male rapists of women and children are the lowest of the low in the prison pecking order? They often have to be placed in protective custody to prevent them from being murdered by the general prison population. So if men who are raped in prison really were being seen as women, their rapists would drop to the bottom of the prison hierarchy and have to be hidden away to prevent a shiv being shoved through their ribs. Thus, women or men who are raped in prison do not have the status of women. They have a status distinctly separate from that of women because they are not afforded the protection of women. Second, and this is my second point to Louise Stanow's assertions. More recent research into prison culture suggests that inmates who willingly take on a female role are afforded respect. These inmates are called fishes, and they choose to act and look like women of their own free will. The difference between fishes and punks is that fishes refuse to let anyone dictate to them what they will do. They will be violent. They will protect their autonomy violently, while punks submit to the humiliation of being forced to do things they otherwise would not. And I think that's the real point. It isn't being made to be feminine that's degrading. Otherwise, why would fishes get respect? Men who choose to willingly be feminine. It's being made to do something you don't want to do that's degrading. If punks, and by punks I mean the guys who are being raped, that's the usual term, identified more with being Packers fans than being men, the men dominating them would force them to cheer for the Giants instead. So it's not just about being seen as feminine. It's also about being forced to do something you don't want to do, being dominated.
Well, but being forced to do, like I said, being dominated and being forced to do something you don't want to do is an emasculation. Like you even see this in other primate societies, chimpanzees, baboons, right? There's something called ritual mounting, and like that males will often do that to subordinate. Dominant males will often do that to subordinate males to keep them in their place. And it doesn't involve any kind of penetration. It just involves getting into the position, right? I'm going to get into the position. I'm going to demonstrate to everybody here that you're my bitch, right? And so it really it does serve an instinct. It does sort of feed into an instinctive sort of feedback loop when you are put in that position, when another man is mounting you, whether he penetrates you or not, right? Whether he's just physically dominating you, whether he's just, he's just got you pinned down, all of those things, right? That there is sort of there has to be an acknowledgement that that guy is the bigger man than me. Even if it's something as horrible as prison rape, and even, if it's something as cowardly as prison rape because you got your freaking big posse here and I don't have any choice because I could take you in a one-on-one, but you got backup.
Okay, but here's the thing. Again, you have the dichotomy here. You have fishes who are prisoners who willingly submit to the female, or no, not submit, but willingly take on the female role. And they are penetrated like women, as presumably the way we see women do, but they are afforded respect within the prison hierarchy. And then you have men who are forced into the role, and they are not afforded respect. So it's not ultimately the act of penetration, of being penetrated, that's the issue. It's the force, the fact that you are being forced to submit. And so it's like she doesn't even know, she doesn't even have the least clue about what she's talking about. She doesn't have, this is my main point about this. This is a so-called advocate for prison rape reform, and she doesn't even have any clue about the culture of prisons.
It's partly because of the filter she's looking through. When you see femininity as a submissive state and a weakened state, then anything that relates to being dominated, being forced to submit, being weakened, any of that, you're going to see that as being feminized. But being emasculated does not necessarily mean being made to be like a woman. Man is emasculated when the things are taken away from him that make him feel like an independent adult as a man. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's being made to feel like a woman. It means he's being made to feel like he's not in control of himself. There's a big difference there. Feminists can't see that big difference because they don't acknowledge women's control over themselves. And I wanted to point out something else. The thing that she says about 93% of prisoners are men. Of course 93% of prisoners are men. Men are targeted and women get a pass. To the point where under the same circumstances, with the same criminal conditions, with the same behaviors, the same case conditions, women are more likely to get away without being arrested. They're more likely to get to not get convicted, and if they are convicted, they're more likely to get a lighter sentence. And even if they get a heavy sentence, they're more likely to get parole, early parole. So they get out. Yeah. They get out of everything.
I think it was Permutation of Ninjas. It was someone on. It was
Permutation of Ninjas that did it. He did the analysis.
he worked backwards from, factoring in all of the discounts that women get in the criminal justice system. Half as likely to be stopped, half as likely to be arrested when stopped, half as likely to be charged when arrested, half as likely to be prosecuted when charged, the whole bit, right? And he worked his way backwards from all of those discounts, and he found that women are all about as likely to commit crime as men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I'm
and
surprised he didn't find that women are more likely to commit crime, because when you can get away with something and when you don't face consequences for it, more people are more likely to do the thing.
Yeah, when you can cry your way out of a speeding ticket, you're more likely to speed, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to the next item. Okay, well, all right. Question from the chat. Aaron Siegel. Hey, Honey Badger Radio. Thoughts on condom distribution in prisons? I would think that would be a good thing. Unfortunately, the people that would really need to target would be men who are forced to submit to sexual contact, and I don't think that they're going to be able to require that their rapists use condoms. But the other thing is that one of the big ways they could really help the prison rape epidemic is to stop making homosexual contact between men illegal in prison. It's consensual homosexual contact.
Yeah, no, I agree. Honestly, any port in a storm, like a lot of you see this on you used to see this on ships where it was an all-male crew. You used to see this, in all kinds of all-male, highly militaristic societies like the Greeks, the Romans, the Spartans, all of that. Particularly if chastity in women was something that was considered a virtue and to be valued and upheld in society, right? That there was a certain amount, and they even have a name for it now, like when it came to the African studies on circumcision, it wasn't necessarily like they.
Men having sex with men is what
men having sex with men, and that doesn't mean that they're gay. It means that they're having sex with men, right? And so you sort of look at all of that and like decriminalizing that and sort of making that not quite so taboo. I think that would
definitely
way to easing tensions in an all-male environment.
Okay, let's get Hannah's comment, and then we need to move on because we're going to run out of time here.
Well, I wanted to point out the thing about that being illegal that really hits home. They can recognize that things like removing all access to sunlight is damaging, and so they even if it's just for an hour a day, they put them outside for an hour a day. There's windows in the cells, even in solitary, there's usually a window, but they can't recognize that even when they recognize that married prisoners have a need for sex in their lives, and they're going to be in there for years and years, they're not going to be able to go years and years without sex. They can't recognize that men who do not have partners still have that need. It's quite a statement on society's view of male sexuality that a wife's involvement is necessary before they can recognize that just because he's been put in prison, something that is a human need for a man continues to be a human need.
But you're looking at it from the entirely wrong direction, and this is both feminist and traditionalist. The idea of the conjugal visit is not to benefit the man who's in prison. It's to benefit his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Right? Like just like being able to avoid the draft because you're married is not to benefit the man, it's to benefit his wife. He can avoid being drafted because it would inconvenience his wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he can have a conjugal visit because it's what his woman needs. That's what that's all about. It has nothing to do with his needs. Nothing at all.
What really galls me is they can recognize in other circumstances just how vital that is. Like when you have a preemie, when you have a premature birth, one of the things they tell you when your baby is born premature, is that skin-to-skin contact will make a difference in the baby's ability to survive. And then one of the practices is, and a lot of times fathers will do this because obviously the mother can't necessarily do this when there are going to be people going in and out of the room, is remove his shirt, and all the baby has on is a diaper and whatever tubes and wires they have attached. And the baby will lay on the dad's chest. That's and for hours, and that helps to provide an emotional support and psychological support that they really haven't been able to quantify it, other than to tell parents of premature babies that it's vital to their survival.
Well, you look at touch deprivation and intimate contact deprivation, and that horrific experiment with the monkeys, the baby monkeys, and you had
the
wire mother with the baby bottle, and then the cloth mother with nothing, and they even made it to the point where, like, the experiment to the point where the cloth mother gave out random electric shocks or some shit. And the baby still preferred the cloth mother, that more closely resembled an actual monkey.
Yeah, touch deprivation is a horrible thing.
We can recognize it for monkeys, but we can't recognize it for men.
No, I know. Yeah. But let's move on to the next item, because that is a bit of a tangent. Okay, so this is number one. Feminist groups. And then this is an unwritten policy, and also I suppose traditionalist groups too. This is sort of like almost like a universal thing, targeting men as perpetrators rather than victims of rape in their rape awareness campaigns, because we need more awareness that men are rapists or that men rape, and we don't need awareness that women rape. But anyway. If you took your information about sexual abuse solely from feminist literature on the issue, you'd probably conclude that the majority of perpetrators are men and the majority of victims are women. Feminist Mary Koss has influenced the Center of Disease Control to erase male rape victims from government statistics. Feminists and so-called anti-rape lobby groups like Just Detention International, apparently in complete denial of the reality of prison rape, reduce situations of overwhelming male victimization to female victimization via convoluted theories about toxic masculinity. And as an icing on the cake, women's groups in Israel and India have concretely removed or blocked men and boys' protections against rape. And finally, feminist rape campaigns usually present a very singular view of rape as something men do to women. This is a lot of institutional shit that's going on to make sure that we think of women as victims and men as perpetrators. But yet, when we look at the statistics, a completely different picture emerges. 38% of the victims of rape were men in the 2012 National Crime Victimization Survey. And this study, as I said before, requires men to classify their victimization as rape and as a crime. Both requirements lead to a reduction of admitted male rape victims relative to other survey instruments, because men have difficulty admitting that they were raped or admitting that what happened to them was criminal in any way, and they even more have difficulty admitting that face-to-face with a surveyor. 43% of college men and high school youth report being sexually assaulted or raped, 95% by women. In another similar survey, 51% of college men report being sexually assaulted or raped since the age of 16. Again, 95% by women. According to the CDC's 12-month statistics, 2 years in a row, 50% of the victims of forced sex were male. And, of course, they will not release the breakdown of the male and female statistics of perpetration on that statistic, but according to their lifetime statistics, 80% of the men were raped by women. So the number one craziest policy regarding rape is the fact that our society, and it's an informal, unwritten policy, is that the fact that our society continues to grant feminists and predatory aid agencies and traditionalists who still believe in that particular model that men rape and women are victims of authority over the word rape. And they continue to reduce a complex problem down to a black and white, woman equal victim, man equal predator, damseling for dollars narrative scheme that's great for milking the public for moolah, but terrible at actually helping any victims at all. And when we say victims, I mean not just victims of rapists, but also victims of those rapey policies by rapey organizations who create a climate of fear for women by exaggerating their victimization, by presenting rape as something that men do to them because they're women, and demonizing men, which I would consider is basically a social rape on a wide scale. And that is the final craziest thing, craziest unwritten policy about rape. And I'll throw that out.
Okay, well, I'll take that up. One of the most interesting things that I found as far as the numbers, the statistics on domestic violence and on rape and sexual violence, is that normally when you're a researcher and you perform a study and you have what would be considered an unexpected finding, right? It's an unexpected finding. It's novel. Like it's something new. We didn't actually know this before. It's like not widely acknowledged as being, in existence, right? Those are typically the findings that you focus on. Oh my goodness, I discovered this really novel thing, this really new, interesting, neato thing, this new discovery about humanity or the ecology or the ecosystem or whatever, right? That's what you cry about. That's what you put in your press release. That's what you promote. That's what you really push in the media. You're like, oh my God, we discovered this thing that nobody expected. Except when it comes to domestic violence and rape. Because every single instance where we found gender symmetry in domestic violence and every single instance where we found gender symmetry in domestic violence, there's a downplaying of the data at best, right, of the unexpected data, and a concealment of the unexpected data, sometimes through terroristic means, at worst. I mean, it really astounds me. Like when you're a researcher and you find something that people wouldn't. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? Women are 40% of rapists, right? And men are half of all victims, right? Who would have thunk that? Nobody. So I'm gonna really make a big deal about this unexpected finding. Yeah, no, they don't.
No, they just quietly shuffle it off into the dark. But the other thing is, if they actually cared about female victims, they would trumpet these findings from the hill. They would be saying this every single chance they could get, because this is the one thing that has actually genuinely been associated with a reduction in the kind of attitudes towards sexual violence that are associated with increased sexual violence towards women. If you want to reduce that, and I personally think we should just reduce violence against everybody. But if you just really want to focus on female victims, the myths that you have to challenge to reduce the rate of female victimization are the myths that support the idea that men can't be raped, aren't raped. If they are, they're raped very, 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 very rarely, and it's just not a big deal. Those are the myths you have to target, because when you target those myths, the evidence shows there is a reduction in the sexual victimization of women. So presenting these findings would do what they say they want to do, and yet they don't.
It's not just that, right? It's also based on an idea of harm reduction, right? Because I think that women can often learn by the male example, right? And the male example is the male is expected to take responsibility for his actions. So if he gets really hammered and he passes out in some room at a frat house and he wakes up next to Alice the Goon, okay, what's the first thing, and there's evidence of sex everywhere and he has no memory of it and he's like, oh my God, I never would have fucked her if I was sober, right? Okay. His first impulse is going to be to say to himself, I'm never going to drink that much again, right? It's not necessarily going to be I was raped or I was victimized, the first thing that he's going to do is to say,
I need to protect myself better.
Well, what did I do? What choices did I make that allowed this Alice the Goon person to take advantage of me in this way, and how can I correct my behavior in the future so that it doesn't happen again? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That will be his first impulse, and he will have an impulse to sort of just walk it off and whatever. And I don't necessarily think that's 100% healthy. I think that often men avoid dealing with those things, and they should maybe deal with them more. But when you look at that reaction, and the first response being, I'm going to take personal responsibility for the things that I did that led to a situation where this could happen, right? That is embracing agency, right? And this is a lesson that women can learn from men, in order to, because if you have a sense, while you are being traumatized, if you have a sense of agency throughout, right? If you have a sense that you have some power, right, throughout, even if, okay, you're going to rape me, but I'm not going to, let you have me easy. I'm gonna fight you. I'm not gonna let you I'm not just gonna lie back and take it, right? If you have that sense of agency where you are in control of some things throughout this traumatic event, it's often easier to recover from that.
Yeah,
right.
And it really is about balancing it.
And
right?
so if feminists were interested in harm reduction, right, they would not be promoting this message that men are a monolithic perpetrator class and women are a monolithic victim class, and like they would be actually promoting the idea that women are actually capable as a class of having power over men, of harming men, of harming other women, of harming children, right? Women are capable of that because they are individuals with agency, right?
They're fully realized human beings.
There you go. And so it just...
Yeah, but the balance is, you're sort of cutting in and out, Karen. The balance, I think, is between recognizing that something is victimization and not violating somebody's agency and their ability to overcome the victimization. And we're not finding that balance because we seem to have this black and white issue, men on one side, women on the other. But we need to get to those news items because Rachel is begging, please. I do want to say one thing before we do. Hannah Wallen has to leave for work, but she did put this out in the chat. These people are willing to throw female victims of female perpetrators under the bus because they are so intent in hiding female perpetration that their preferred gender for victims ceases to be the preferred gender for victims if the perpetrator is the wrong gender. So yeah, the number of rape victims that these narratives, and it's not just a feminist narrative, it's also a traditionalist narrative. However, it seems like there are a lot of, I don't know if they're really like, maybe more of a religious traditionalist narrative rather than a conservative narrative, but that you don't see female victimization or female perpetration and male victimization. And these narratives, they deny not just male victims but female victims of female aggressors. So there are a lot of people being left out in the cold by this very black and white scheme that has risen around rape, and yeah, we should change that, and that's the final crazy unwritten policy. It's more like a social, overwhelming social bias towards seeing women as victims and men as perpetrators. But Rachel, go ahead. Let's do the news items.
Let's do the thing.
Yeah, let's sing the thing.
Let's try and lighten things up a little bit. It's gotten really
it's pretty dark.
Well, yeah, there's no. That's the thing, that there's no real way to really lighten this. It's an issue. It's an issue that's so awful that we have this narrative, and it's helping no one. It's not helping. It's not even helping female victims of male rapists because it denies
the interventions that would prevent the rapists who rape them from getting the treatment that they need to not do that. And
Exactly. It's a lot like the Measure B rule law in California that is now forcing adult performers to wear condoms on all sets, while also lessening the stringent rules that have to do with testing. It's basically the same thing in the sense that we are having women completely put themselves out there and ignore common sense, real life, adult behavior, such as taking care of yourself, not being drunk in public when you think it might be a dangerous situation. These things are very common sense. Why are we disabling entire half of the population from behaving like rational adults?
Yeah, but let's get to the news items, because we do need to wrap it up.
It's only 2, so we're good.
Yes.
It'll be brief. Obama to cut funding to CDC prostate cancer research. In a proposed budget for 2016, the funding towards prostate cancer is on the chopping block. Prostate cancer advocacy groups are saying that it's not merely a cut to funding, but a complete cut of funding, a total of $13.2 million. With only a handful of news outlets even discussing the potential funding cut, it's true male disposability in action. It's not the first time that prostate cancer research has been put in jeopardy, and it likely won't be the last. But it isn't merely a cut to prostate cancer. As it turns out, funding for CDC cancer screening as a whole has also been cut significantly in this proposal, specifically breast and cervical cancer screenings, stating that the Affordable Care Act will sufficiently handle screenings for low-income individuals. Causes that received an increase in funding include rape prevention and education, meaning that we just pulled funding for prostate cancer so that men can sit through classes that may assume they are potential rapists. Thanks, Obama.
Okay, all right. So what I want to say is this. There was also funding cut to female-specific health issues as well, right?
Yeah.
But so once again, we see men and women both being screwed in order to pump money into this damseling for dollars scheme that helps nobody, least of which female or male victims of rape. It's
here's
just
the thing.
pork.
There were a lot of cuts, but the thing about it is that these are things that are supposed to, here's the thing, they didn't cut all the funding to breast cancer and cervical cancer research and education and stuff like that. This proposed cut, from what I understand, and this is only according to the advocacy groups, the stuff, like the few sources that were actually even covering this, this is all of the money that was into the CDC's budget for prostate cancer research and education and stuff like that.
So I guess the Affordable Care Act will take care of research for prostate cancer then as well. Like it's taking care of the screenings of female cervical cancer.
This is just from the CDC, but it's still kind of distressing that this is like, you know what? Oh, fuck prostate cancer. We think that adequate screening should help this instead of, me trying to find ways to actually completely prevent it.
Fix it. Yeah.
That would be nice. But like, no. Listen, we feel that the money we've put into the Affordable Care Act is going to be enough to help people in screenings. Well, see, screenings only help people who already have the cancer.
Well,
that only lets you know, oh, guess what, you've got cancer.
What really gets me is that they're diverting funds from cancer research to rape farming.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, the amount that actually went into, it's going into rape prevention is I think an increase of $5 million. So not nearly the amount that prostate cancer had. Actually, I think the lion's share of it is going into trying to combat problems with. So I think it's like more resistant bacteria and stuff like that that's coming out of people using a lot of antibiotics and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's going to be up to the Canadians to deal with the prostate cancer thing because, like about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I was dating an oncologist, and he was sitting on the board he was sitting on the committee that issued grants, and he was he was one of the people who decided where the $2.5 million went to deal with prostate cancer and try and research a cure or a treatment, right? So, that sort of, we are a little bit more, maybe it's because we're not quite so concerned with turning a profit. And one of the problems with prostate cancer is it's generally a later in life disease. Whereas breast cancer often hits women in their 30s, right? So we sort of look at that 60-year-old guy who has prostate cancer, and we're like, well, he's 60, right? And we don't really care as much. I mean, like, there's the male factor, there's the age factor as well, right? But yeah, no, it just, there has been some promising research regarding prostate cancer with retroviral genetic therapy, right? Gene therapy. So, I mean, like, I don't understand why they would defund it.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
It really is, and they're like, oh, hey, you know what we should pour, like, some money into research for? Yeah, rape prevention, because you've been so good at that.
That is not... Okay,
So
we need to stop calling what they do rape prevention, because it doesn't prevent anything. It actually ensures that it continues. I mean, for all we know, if we had gotten rid of all of the feminist and that particular narrative, a more traditionalist narrative about rape out of our culture, we would have ended it by now. If we not spent any money on it.
Look at it this way. Look at the way the FBI redefined rape, right? And it was very ambiguous as to whether that included male victims of made to penetrate or not. The FBI actually did respond finally to somebody who sent repeated emails, right, asking whether a man forced into vaginal sex with a woman would be considered a rape victim under that definition, and the FBI said yes, right, but it was not clear in the definition. It was ambiguous, right, and that means that law enforcement agencies may not automatically know to file those things or to report those things as rapes because the definition that the FBI came up with is ambiguous, right? But when you look at the way we have redefined rape to be like, okay, so I'm 14 years old and I'm getting hot and heavy with a guy who's 15, and he puts his fingers in my vagina. And then I'm like, yeah, no, right? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, right? And backs off, right? I was just raped, according to the definition. Now, I was just raped because I didn't give my consent. It wasn't something that I wanted, and he did it, right? And then as soon as he knew that I didn't want him to do it, he stopped doing it, right? But I was still raped, according to that definition. And like, so we're seeing this huge expansion of, and it's not even necessarily an expansion of the definition of rape, it's an expansion of all of the things men do to women that women should feel traumatized worse than death about, right? Like,
so it's essentially expansion of the mythology of female fucking victimhood.
Yes, that's really what it is, and it's just like, I'm sorry. Like, there were a couple of guys when I was like 15, 16, 14, whatever, who put their fingers in my junk, and I was like, yeah, no, that's plenty far enough. Let's back off. And they backed off, and everything was fine, and I didn't feel violated, and I didn't feel traumatized. I was just like, no, not willing to continue from there. Let's just take it one step back, right?
Well,
That's how a normal human being deals with that, right? But according to feminists, I should have reported that to the fucking police and had that 15-year-old boy arrested.
Well, that's exactly the point. They're trying to turn women into completely incapable things, unable to deal with reality, and also extremely solipsistic, self-centered. You have to read my mind. You have to know what I'm thinking. The tiniest transgression against me is, end of the world. It's the ultimate princess syndrome, and also it completely disables people from excusing each other's accidents, from just in any way dealing with reality as it is. And on top of
Yeah,
that, I have quite a few, tens of thousands of online clients over the years. And the way I run my room is I am completely welcoming to taboo roleplay, to pretty much, I get off on what they get off on. It's weird, but it's what it is. Even if it's something I don't particularly like, if they're getting off on it, I'll like it more. So in that very open, welcoming environment, I can count on half of one hand on how many men had at all a dominating rape kind of fantasy and wanted to roleplay that. It is to me, at least from what I've seen, men want to be desired. They want the woman to have sex. And so this is really cuts to the core of the fact that we're running this narrative that women do not enjoy sex. The women do not enjoy sex, period, as Dworkin was saying that the third wave feminism, which is why I have a problem with it when it comes to sex positivity, because third wave feminism entirely dealt with Dworkin's if it is a sexual act, that means a woman's being oppressed. So the very act of something that women enjoy, something that's necessary for reproduction, something what we've been doing since the beginning of time, that's how we got here, that's something somehow is offensive to women, and I believe that's total bull. On top of that, I know people, I am myself one, there are women who legitimately get off on consensual rape. There is an idea of, like I said, romantic Beauty and the Beast type, where, somebody's so into you, they just gotta have you, and it is basically consensual rape. You can consent to the fact that this man will impose himself on you and dominate you, and as 50 Shades of Grey is any evidence at all, we as women are very much into the idea of a dominating man sexually. And feminism is doing such a disservice to women everywhere by denying them their sexuality, by denying them their kinks, by denying them pleasure, and it's freaking disgusting if I'm frank about it.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to pull one thing out because it ties right into the next news item, and this idea that feminism and this it is, there's the feminist narrative essentially is the traditionalist narrative, and I don't mean to pull out any particular culture when I say traditionalist, but because you see it with yin and yang, you see it all over the world, and there's a biological component to it, of course, that women receive men's actions, but the progressive slant is that women only receive it when women become victims of them. So it's like exactly the same thing, except just the most black and ugly way of looking at it possible. And it creates a culture of fear in which women limit themselves. They judge their own desires. They limit their interactions with men. They are unnecessarily afraid of men. And they limit their own potential. And for no good goddamn fucking reason. And cue the next news item, Rachel.
Oh, God. Paranoid Stockholm woman causes man to speak on violence against women. Meanwhile, in Sweden, nursing student Johan Nylander, I'm probably butchering that name, decided to take a shortcut through the woods at night. A woman took one look at him and bolted. Instead of shrugging it off, Johan decided to talk about how sad it is that women live in fear of rape. Never mind that women are not the only people who experience that kind of violence. Nope, it's somehow men who are responsible somehow for women's feelings. Men must help women to be less paranoid about sexual assault. According to the article discussing this post, it mentions that men in Sweden are twice as likely to be assaulted. But there doesn't appear to be campaigns to end violence of this kind against men. The perception there, like here in the West, is that there is a plague of violence against women, a rape epidemic that must be stopped. But in reality is often the media hyping specific cases that gives people this impression. If you want women to be less paranoid, how about you stop hyping gang rapes and brutal assaults on women? Instead, there's this white knight mentality that rises up and makes things worse. If you can't feel safe in a country with record low levels of crime, is there any place that can make you truly feel safe?
So essentially what this guy's done is he's taken a woman who has an irrational fear and he's supported it. Congratulations.
Pretty much, and he made a Facebook post saying that how messed up. He says, like, how messed up does it have to be that a woman is so afraid of being sexually assaulted that she does something like that? I mean, the thing about it is you don't know whether or not she has some previous, things with guys, or maybe she was assaulted in the past or something like that. Maybe now she has an irrational fear of being out at night. We don't know.
Yeah, and encouraging this, and what's really interesting is the people that encourage this are the very people who are busy hiding the reality, the statistical reality, and hyping this abusive narrative that women are uniquely likely to be victimized because they're women when they aren't. They're actually uniquely protected because they're women. And I use an analogy to this behavior to just make how abusive this is to women clear. Imagine you have like an elderly aunt who's living alone in her own house, and a salesperson, a house alarm salesperson, figures out that she's all alone, and she doesn't have relatives well, she has relatives, but they don't live with her, and so this home alarm salesman targets her and starts sending her exaggerated information about the violence that she can face in her safe and quiet neighborhood. Day after day after day, more and more horrific stories of violence and inflated statistics, outright lies, context-less statistics. Day after day, grinding her into a state of fear. Immediately, you think your great aunt, I don't know, maybe great aunt Lily is being abused. She's being traumatized. She's being hurt by this salesperson. And you immediately recognize it as abuse. But when it's the government and feminists and, to a far lesser extent, traditionalists, when it's these people, when it's that that feminist fear-mongering narrative being directed at women, suddenly it's not abusive anymore. Suddenly you just have to accept it's for the best. Fuck that.
Well, this is really why I think that that women can be helped by a greater acknowledgement of male victims of physical violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, all of it, right? Because women have this idea, and because they've been told constantly, right, that they're being targeted for this because they're women. So they are unique and particular and specific targets of this kind of abuse and violence and assault and all of this stuff, right? That they are essentially that they should live their lives in fear, because but if those women can actually embrace and internalize the idea, right, that all of the things that women are victims of, right, men are either equal victims of or more likely to be victims of, right? Every single form of violence and victimization and all of that women are subject to, men are equally or more likely to be subject to, right? And men somehow manage to just, they somehow manage to, it's not like they walk at night without fear, but they don't demand an escort to their car.
Sorry, Karen, there's something going on. Oops, sorry. Actually, it was me. I apologize. You can unmute now. There was like some really bad feedback, and I thought it was you, but it was actually me. Continue.
But like that these men somehow manage to function in society with not without a care, right? But that they manage to cope, and they manage to they manage to just accept that, okay, life isn't perfect, and I have to be aware of my surroundings, but so does everybody, and all of these things, right? And it's not that big. I don't have to live in terror, right? I have to be aware of my surroundings, but I don't have to live in constant fear, right? If women actually sort of learned from the example of men, given that men are as likely or more likely to be victims of everything, right, then I think that would benefit women. That is the ethic that would see more women seeking public office. That would be the ethic that would see more women speaking their minds on the internet. That would be the ethic that would help women, become more assertive in their everyday lives, right? That would be, just because, like you cannot. This is the thing. Like I'm Anita Sarkeesian. I'm going to say some really horribly inflammatory thing about masculinity and school shootings, right? And how maleness is to blame for school shootings.
Karen,
you victim, and I'm gonna
Karen, slow down for a sec. You cut out almost an entire sentence. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm going to say inflammatory shit, and then I'm going to get upset when people say it back to me.
No, well, that when people take offense, and when people say that they take offense, and I'm going to say to all the women out there, see, this is what happens when you're a woman and you speak your mind online, right? Like this is what they're like. And here's the thing, men who say those kinds of shit, like Jonathan McIntosh has gotten 800 fucking times more nasty fucking vitriol than Anita Sarkeesian has. Anita Sarkeesian has gotten a lot of criticism, but Jonathan McIntosh is the person who's the object of extreme hate, right? And yet she's saying, I'm being targeted because I'm a woman, right? And you, if you dare to speak up, you will be targeted because you're a woman. And when she was in Sweden at that freaking panel discussion, and there was a woman in the audience, and she stood up in the Q&A, and she said, I've been doing journalism for 20 years, and I've never had anything like this happen, but now I'm just terrified that something like this could happen to me, and I don't know what I would do, and I'm wondering if I should continue with my career, right? Like,
oh Jesus, Karen,
doing.
you need to market that. I mean, you should get a wig and a dress and do that on a YouTube channel that's completely unaffiliated, and then open a Patreon channel, and you'll probably get 16K in a month.
Wait, but Anita, if you do that, then they win. The terrorists win.
I'm not making bank by telling the people who threaten me, oh, fuck, my kitchen's a disaster and the house hasn't been vacuumed in weeks. Do you think we could reschedule till Friday?
Hold on. But you see, they already have.
Yeah, they already have, according to
executive producer Dick Wolf.
You're awfully lively for a dead woman, Karen.
Special thanks to Dick Wolf.
Oh my God! Like it's
Okay.
We need to
I just have to share something really personal with everybody about the Law and Order theme song, the original Law and Order theme song, because that was on A&E 3 times a day when I had cable and no computer, and I used to watch it when I was pregnant with my kids, and from the first day of birth, from the first day after being born, my first 2 kids, okay, they could be screaming, and I would put them on the breast and I would start feeding them, and then Law and Order would come on and the music would start to play, and they would abandon the breast and they would turn and stare at the TV until the song was done. Okay. And then, so of course I noticed this pattern with my 2 kids. So I was just like, oh, I'm just going to have a VCR, a VHS tape with the Law and Order theme just playing back to back for 45 minutes. And anytime they get fussy, I'm just going to stick that in the VCR and I'm just going to play it, right? And it worked like a charm.
I do have a personal.
Utterly off topic.
It was.
You know what, Karen? You've totally stumped me because I have no way of getting from your anecdote about the Law and Order theme song, calming your kids, and the actual topic of the show. So good job. You've totally flummoxed me.
Karen, you leveled up.
Yeah, you leveled up. You leveled up in derailment,
for
my friend.
everyone.
You're like the transcendent derailment now. Okay,
Yeah,
Anna,
trivia.
go ahead and say
Well,
what
I
you want to
have
say.
a similar, unfortunately, to my great shame, to my awful great shame, I used to watch SVU obsessively in a high school senior year. Just nothing but reruns of SVU, as I was so interested. I was studying to be a psychologist. I was about to go to college to be a psychologist, and I was interested in sex in general. And it was so juicy, all these ideas of sex and women and terrible things that happen, and it didn't ever occur to me until later in life as to how awful of a propaganda it was to incite panic, fear, and just contributing to the whole system. And I'm
It's
so
torture
sorry.
porn. Torture rape porn is what it is.
It's fetishizing victims in women.
And
Just
I'm not
because-
off on it.
Yeah, I think they do. Look at the primary watchers of that show. It's always women. They just seem to love watching women get
Yeah, they
victimized.
eat that shit up. I look at
I don't know why.
Okay, all right, Karen, I'm gonna have to mute you if you continue to make those horrific sounds. But I don't know. I don't understand it. Like when I turn on the TV and the first 5 minutes I see 3 women being victimized, I'm like, you know what? Fuck this shit. I'm turning it off. I'm gonna listen to some fucking rock and do some inking of my comic. And I don't even. It's not. Nothing of it appeals to me. Nothing. I don't understand the mentality.
I don't mind I have no problem with depictions of women being victimized. Just like I have no problem with the depictions of Maximus in the movie Gladiator, right, where he was victimized and victimized and victimized and victimized and then victimized again and then again and then again and then he died, right? I don't have any problem with that, and it's just a matter of how it's handled, and I really like the SVU fetishization of rape of women, as like every single victim is supposed to be considered an SVU victim, where like she jumps at every sudden noise and she showers for 3 hours and scours herself with lye and a wire brush and still can't get clean, and she just like she doesn't sleep a sound night, for years, and she's just on edge all, like that I have a problem with, right? I really love seeing stories of people being victimized and then overcoming their situation and finding strength in themselves to get past it, right? And I love that when it's a man like Maximus in Gladiator, or whether it's a woman like Ripley in Alien, or whatever, right? Like I love those stories of humans facing adversity and being put through the ringer and having the shit beat out of them and coming out maybe not on top, but surviving it and being okay. I love those stories, right? But those are not the stories that SVU tells. Those are stories where it's like they're literally sexualizing rape. They're making it titillating. They're making it into a fetish, and they're making the trauma response into a fetish. And it just that's not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not a good example for victims.
I think the only way this is going to change is if we start mocking the shit out of these women. It's like, my God, do you not have a gonad in your damn body? Like, how can you stare like a frickin' special needs child with a stream of drool coming out, watching this women being victimized and just helplessly, oh.
Now you know my pain.
Yeah, it's like, how can
my mom just loves watching that stuff. She loves watching that and like the Lifetime channel and stuff like that.
Yeah,
oh my fucking God.
It's just it's like nails on a chalkboard. And yes, I understand where you're coming from, Karen. I do like stories of people overcoming victimization, but just watching that helpless, flailing state of weakness, and that's exactly what it is. Looking at women being weak. And just being fixated on it, like how?
I remember this one movie. It was oh God, I forget what it was called. But it was with Kiefer Sutherland and Sally Field. Um, and essentially, this Sally Field played a mother of a woman who her teenage daughter was home. She was stuck in traffic. Her daughter was home. There was a home invasion. They were talking on the phone, right? And the home invasion, the dude who Kiefer Sutherland raped her and killed her daughter, right? Raped her daughter and killed her daughter, right? And it was like the issue with that was not so much the like it was essentially how Sally Field got past that. She went and she took self-defense classes. She was being followed by somebody in a parkade, and she successfully defended herself, and she went booyah. And then she went and she took matters into her own hands when the guy who killed her daughter was acquitted, and all of the so she actually it was almost like a death wish for a female character. This would be a movie that I would think would be, somebody has suffered a horrible traumatic experience and a horrible traumatic loss, but they went out and they got the tools to be able to deal with that and settle it, right? And that, I think, is a much better example than so many of the cases that you see on SVU where, the woman doesn't want to cooperate with police, and, and the police kind of almost put the strong arm pressure on her to actually cooperate, and we got to get this guy, and, we have to convince you to get him, and all, it just, why can't they portray women as having any kind of strength? I mean, the only relationship in that show that I respect is the relationship between, what's her name, the main female character and her mother, because the main female character is a product of rape, right?
Yeah.
And well, they have a very interesting relationship because of that, right? And that's the only relationship in that show. That's the only thing in that show that seems to have any kind of anything that's deeper than a puddle.
Yeah, it's and the thing is that feminism bills itself as being about women's strength, and yet all it ever does is reduce women down to victims in every conceivable circumstance and shame everybody who questions them for doing so.
Yeah.
As a misogynist. But I think we've trailed off to an interesting place that we could probably end, unless anybody wants to add something. Do we want to talk?
Are we gonna finally chill and then go?
Yeah, I'm actually feeling like I want to take a snooze, as it were.
Oh, see,
there's my off.
Well,
what Doge?
Allison is becoming an old lady and she needs to sleep.
Yeah, I need to sleep early because I'm old and decrepit. What were you gonna say, Doge?
Oh, I was just gonna say post dank memes. That's all.
Yeah, post some dank memes. Yeah, and prepare to be slaughtered.
I have no frickin' clue what you guys are. I have less than a clue. I probably have a negative clue, but you know what? I'm just gonna surf the waves of complete
Gotta end it on a high note. This was serious topics. Prepare to be slaughtered.
Prepare to be slaughtered.
Okay, and now we shall commence the shilling. The shilling shall now commence, so if you want to skip, this is when. If you want to leave, this is the time to do it. Because, the shilling, there's nothing left of the show except the shilling. And I'm going to say one more time, and then I'm going to get to it. Shilling. All right, so if you like our show, and we really are the only show, I think, that really presents these topics in the way that we do, which is you know, the voice of women who want to see men and women have each other's backs. In this case, we're much more focused on women having men's backs because we don't want to buy more into the idea of women being a victim. And if you like that kind of stuff, we really do need your help to make sure that the show continues and expands. Hopefully expands, gets more content, gets more shows going up, gets more reach. And yeah, so if you like what we have to say, we need help, we need resources, or we need help from viewers like yourself to keep going, to keep expanding, to make sure this continues and that we don't just disappear one day. So please consider what
This just in. This just in. This just in. My boyfriend has just told me, hey, did you know they did a Law and Order about Gamergate?
Oh my fucking god! No, we're shilling. God damn it, that's the end. We're not doing it anymore.
No. But I'm just saying. He said, did you know that they did a Law and Order about Gamergate? He just told me this. He was just like, hey, did you know this? Right? So
yes, we know.
Yeah, we know. That's the whole joke.
We've known for a while now. In fact, we've known.
We watched it last night together. We even did some commentary in a recording she might release later.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
No, please don't release those recordings. They're so chaotic. It's painful.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, we just.
Well, you can release them, but whatever. So
no, we're on the radio, honey. Oh my god.
This is getting it. Sending into madness.
All right, so this is all right. Okay, silence. Let me just finish the shilling. Anyway.
Okay, I'm being quiet now.
Yes. Shh. All right, so if you like the show, if you like what we have to say, we are, I believe, the only show that brings attention to these issues in the way that we do. We look at the situation for men, we look at the situation for women. We do have an emphasis on how men are vulnerable in these situations, but that's because it is completely ignored by mainstream society, to the detriment of both men and women, because it promotes this idea of women being victims. If you want to see this show continue, want to see it expand, we need your help to do that. So please do consider patroning us. You can find our patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Every bit helps a great deal to make sure that this platform continues and it just doesn't disappear one day.
And helps us spread our evil across the land.
It helps us spread our evil across the land. So, yes, please do consider patroning us. And I should also briefly shill that we do have a Steam group called Honey Badger Radio Gamers with Bite. If you want to join the Steam group, there's a lovely bunch of very strange people involved with that. So, yes. So, anyway, I want to say goodnight. Thank you to all of the panelists who took part with this. It was a great fun. It's always great fun with you guys. Great group of people, great group of listeners, great group of current patrons. It's awesome. So thank you.